Hi there you scale motorcade lovers and welcome in my super tiny shed. Today I'm going to show you a diorama of a car that is one of the most popular Tamiya kits of all time, the Toyota Supra. Check out quickly what got me hooked on this bombshell of a car.
I got inspired by the Toyota Supra when I stumbled upon an article about an abandoned JGTC car from the Japanese Grand Touring Championship left to gather dust in some storage shed in Japan. A full-blown race car just sitting there under a few tarps. The beautiful Castrol green and red livery instantly reminded me of those classic Fiats and Lancias in their red and green Alitalia colors. Bold, stylish, unmistakably built for racing. And of course, this Supra became a cult icon thanks to its role in the very first Gran Turismo game, released on the then brand new Sony PlayStation. All those elements combined sparked the idea for a diorama. Not an exact replication of what was under the real tarp, but something a little nicer to look at. The key technical challenge in this video would be the cover that had to lie over the Supra. How do you drape a believable cloth over the car without damaging the model? It really made my head spin and turned out to be quite the journey. I did a lot of research on this car because I wanted it to look believable. But the real Supra GT from Team Toms has been updated over the years, and the one found in that storage shed is pretty much the final version. Tamiya's kit, however, represents the first version, and I didn't feel like completely rebuilding the car into the later spec. That would take ages, and you've been waiting long enough for my videos. Some elements are molded directly into the body, but I always find those a bit bland looking. The smallest details matter the most because they are what convince the viewer and make them look longer at your diorama. Parts that aren't important, like the underside in this case, I finish as quickly and simply as possible. Snip them off the sprue, a bit of filing and sanding, and not too much effort on mold lines. You won't see them anyway. And then a coat of black. Well, black, Tamiya NATO black, because I like that shade better. Wheels do matter, so I spend a lot of time on those. Although Tamiya does a pretty decent chroming on its wheels, I always want to keep control over the chorus myself. The molded in center lock of the wheel gets an upgrade too. Just a few interventions give the rim a lot more credit. The same with the mirrors. I wanted the mirror glass to be separate from the housing, but they are molded as one piece. The mirror stalks are too thick as well. Improving details like these immediately elevates your model. It just becomes more interesting to look at. The mesh Tamiya includes for the grille must have come straight from a window screen factory, because it's far too coarse and undefined for a car model. Cutting this Hasegawa metal mesh, on the other hand, is just satisfying. You could almost develop a fetish for it, and with a few strips of evergreen plastic it suddenly looks exactly right. I approach the exhaust in the same way. Another simple detail that brings your model much closer to reality, and it's so easy to do. The fire suppression system, however, took a bit more time, and honestly, how much of it will you see even later? The same goes for the electrical system running openly through race cars. How much of that is actually visible? And yet, all those details together make it feel like a real race car. The fun part of researching a car like this is that you really get to know it, although that bundle of cable spaghetti on the floor still hides plenty of secrets for me. That's why I asked F1 journalist Craig Scarborough for help with a component I couldn't identify. Luckily, he's also into building race car scale models, so his reply came quickly. This special tool, I'm not sure if it's still available, makes it incredibly easy to create ribbed hoses. Because you will not find these in the kit, and they are an important asset in the interior of a race car. Using milliput is handy since it is malleable when fresh. So it will conform the shapes of the floor pan easily. But make no mistake, this stuff cures rock hard in a few hours. This is the pneumatic lift system found in many race cars. It raises the car onto 4 legs so the wheels can be changed during a pit stop. Bit by bit, the floor pan is turning into a lively jumble of cables and hoses. So let's move on to the steering wheel. Resin buttons and a new steering column make the whole assembly much more detailed. And whenever you see Tamiya list the color X18 for a race car, 9 times out of 10 it actually means carbon fiber. That turned out to be true for these door panels as well, so I looked for the right pattern to apply. I also wrapped the fuel tank in carbon decal sheet just for the top though. The bottom gets painted black. Because I want you to be able to look into the car reasonably well, I wanted one of the windows to be rolled down. I had to scratch build that myself, and that takes time, especially shaping the curve of the glass. You'd be surprised how curved side windows actually are. I'm jumping from one thing to the next. Hope you can still follow me, because here's attempt number 1 at making the tarp for the car. How was I going to approach this? I wanted to form the cloth over the unpainted body and still be able to remove it later. And I plan to make it from a paper tissue. If you cut off the edges, you get 4 very thin layers of stretchy paper. You'd be amazed how strong a single layer is. Perfect for draping. This would be my first time using VMS paper shaper for something this large, so I knew it would be a learning experience. And it was, because the paper shaper glue is so strong that you can't get the tissue off again. I tried using talcum powder as a barrier, but that didn't work either. Then I thought, what if I use Mr. Masking Sol as an isolator? It seemed promising, but turned out not to work because the silicone stayed behind in the tissue paper when I removed it. At that point I'd had enough. So I went back to painting parts. Always fun. I airbrushed everything with my Harder and Steenbeck Evolution Silverline. It's a great airbrush, but I really wished for something more ergonomic. During long painting sessions your hands just cramp up. The solution would eventually come my way on its own, but you'll see that later. And the painting of the headlight reflectors, which I did with all-clad gloss black base and chrome, that would come back to haunt me. Just keep watching. According to ChatGPT, this decal sheet has 94 decals. Count them if you like. I had never stickered a race car before, so this was my first time, and immediately with this many. It's fun to do though, and using my heated coffee cup holder for heating the water helps the decals release from the paper much faster. Some decals are simply tricky to apply, and sometimes you have a whole bunch crammed into a tiny area, like these ventilation openings, and occasionally you need to trim a decal down to make it easier to handle. Once everything is in place, you really need to let the decals dry for at least 1 or 2 days before applying a clear coat. Always start the first clear coat as a light mist. Afterwards you can build it up more. Unfortunately, the Tamiya lacquer paint reacted with the L-Clad 2 chrome. I did not see that coming. Tamiya paint is usually extremely mild to other paints. If you know why this happened, I'd love to hear it. I originally aimed for a high gloss finish, but changed my mind because race cars usually aren't as glossy as showroom cars. Masking and spraying the window trims is something I always find a bit scary. Overspray is just waiting to ruin your model. Thankfully it went well, and applying the Tamiya washes worked perfectly too. I also painted the details with Tamiya lacquer paint. It works nicely, but it dries fast, so it's not for everyone. Painting the mesh in the ventilation openings caused most of my tiny holes to clog. I later reopened them one by one with a miniature drill bit. My OCD definitely comes in handy. I painted the taillights with Tamiya enamel and the headlight rubbers with Molotov acrylic markers. I prefer those over using a chunky Edding 500 to finish the edges. Did you know that the Supra Mark IV has its trunk door lock hidden in its taillight? In the race car it is removed for weight reasons. Fitting the headlight lenses is a bit fiddly. They easily jump out of your tweezers. The inside edges of the window need to be painted black to hide the glue line, just like on real cars. I really would have liked to have a masking sheet for this, like the ones Tamiya produces nowadays, but honestly I was too lazy to design one in Illustrator and cut it out on my plotter. From there on, it's mostly about finishing details, like painting various indicator lights, knobs and switches. I discovered that the doors of the race version don't even have a door lock at all. There's literally just holes there. I'm quite happy with how this pneumatic connector turned out. Details like these are what makes it feel like a real race car. And bit by bit, everything for the body starts coming together. And it's about time, because there's still a lot left to do. Gluing in parts like the taillight glass was done with gloves to prevent fingerprints. The massive louvers in the bonnet to cool the 3S GT engine were also bonded to the body. The sepia decals are just stuck over the headlights, as JGTC races were held in broad daylight and you didn't need them. Take this racing seat for example. In real life it's made from Kevlar, which is yellow with a black H-shaped weave pattern. Tamiya did something else here and I wasn't happy with it. So I tried this Kevlar decal sheet from Scale Motorsport. According to the manufacturer, the sheet has been sitting around too long because it completely disintegrated in water. Great, time to come up with yet another alternative.
Completely torn here. It just doesn't want to come loose from the backing paper. Look at this, people. It completely disintegrates.
In the end, I designed my own Kevlar pattern and printed it as a decal. And to be fair, it turned out pretty decent. Installing the seat belts is a nightmare for me. Anyone who's been following me from the very beginning or who's watched my older videos knows that an entire project of mine, the Lotus 107 F1 car, completely crashed because of the seat belts. That was actually my very first project on this channel, so you can imagine I'm mildly traumatized. Luckily, this time it all worked out and the VMS Flexi 4K glue should keep everything firmly in place. The dashboard pattern supplied by Tamiya was also pretty poor, so once again I made my own carbon decals. Be careful with Good Smile Racing decal fitter, by the way, it's extremely aggressive. One swipe and the decal turns soft as a kitten. I suggested a few stickers with a dab of white paint. The toggle switches, made from real metal, look absolutely fantastic, but it's nerve-wracking to slot them into those super narrow drilled holes. If you hold the switch knob into your tweezers and press too hard, it will fly out, never to be seen again. I punched out the logo on the steering wheel using a hollow punch. You only get one shot at something like that. A self-mixed faded grey on the steering wheel makes it look a bit older. I can't stress enough that using reference photos just help you to make your model credible. The internet is your friend. And some details are pretty easy to make yourself, just like the wiring I traced from the buttons using a reference photo. Then I thought it might be fun to fully recreate the paddle box in a realistic way, complete with all its cylinders and linkages. This is actually pretty ridiculous because once the car is assembled, you can barely see any of it. Pure showing off on my part, dear viewers. I'm just a helpless sucker when I start scratch building such a thing. I'm just unstoppable. It takes so much time, but it also gives me so much satisfaction. Oh, the wheels! They have to look perfect, so I put a lot of effort into those. Every single bolt on the wheel gets drilled in. A quartet of decals were applied to make the rim even more racy, and the center wheel lock gets a dab of viable Tamiya iron look. The small bolts got attention too, and I even added a subtle shadow around them. And what about these valves from Decalcas? I gave myself full artistic freedom and painted the cap red, even though that doesn't show up in any reference photo. Bold move. The tires picked up some dirt purely by accident during sanding and I absolutely love it. Applying the rub-on decals went wrong because I'm an inexperienced klutz with that kind of thing.
Upside down, Rob.
Even though it's actually very easy. After sealing everything with a protective varnish, I dirtied up the tires a bit more and look at this. Don't they look just like real race tires? This is one of those easy jobs that always earns you bonus points. Applying a wash. It instantly adds depth to the object and helps avoid a flat, lifeless look. I tried to make the fire suppression system in the car more attractive. It has quite a lot of cables attached to it. The wires are from an electric coil and I painted on Tamiya surface primer to get proper adhesion of the black paint. Once installed, it looks pretty neat. I went a bit overboard with the wiring inside the car by adding tiny text to it. Nobody will ever see it. I really should have put some ridiculous message on there just for fun. I'm not entirely sure what this lever actually does, but I suspect it adjusts the ride height. Another small detail with some scratch-built parts that adds credibility to a race car. The components on the underside are of lesser importance. And sometimes it's just wonderful to be able to glue things together without everything being extremely delicate. Mounting the wheels didn't go quite as smoothly as I'd hoped.
It's really real pressing.
Should I start coating the axles with Vaseline?
Yeah, there it goes.
Or maybe a bit with WD-40 next time? I had to slightly lengthen the seatbelt. But after that, the race seat was finally finished. And thankfully, my project didn't crash because of the belts this time. Now I could continue assembling the interior and installing the roll cage. But not before I put the gear lever in place and painted some cables connected to that roll cage. For the throttle pedal I made this small cylinder connected to a little box. I think this will only be visible for you guys watching this video. So you are the witness, it is actually there. The interior mirror of course needed a piece of Hasegawa mirror foil. Snapping the dashboard into place was probably the most satisfying moment of this entire build, apart from cutting mesh and applying cloth. And suddenly the interior is done. A few quick shots to show it all off, because soon it'll be much harder to see. But you know it's all there, right? Okay, now it's time to destroy all that beauty, because this car is a barn find, remember? So a thick layer of dust is absolutely appropriate. I'll be honest with you, this part always scares me a little. It feels like you're ruining your entire project in one go. But once everything dries, the result is almost always better than expected. With oil paint, you have a long working time, about 4 hours, to adjust things. Just use a bit of odorless thinner and wipe away any excess paint. Installing the windows is another job that always makes me a bit nervous, especially since I'd been messing around with the glass so much during all those cloth experiments. But everything went smoothly and the body could be placed onto the chassis, without any glue. Like I said before, precise details are what make your car believable. This photo etch set from Aber is absolutely beautiful. Pro tip: never leave photo etched parts in their raw steel color. Always paint them, otherwise they feel visually disconnected from other parts, like plastic components that are also meant to represent metal. The vanes for the diffuser got a carbon treatment and were glued onto the body. And this is another classic model building moment, losing a part. Luckily it wasn't a particularly difficult one and I was able to reproduce the tow hook fairly quickly. I continued testing the cloth. This time my poor dummy Jaguar was covered with an already painted sheet and I wanted to see if oil paint was really the best choice for adding dust. It wasn't, and dry brushing gave completely the wrong look. I settled on Tamiya Buff instead, because it's almost an exact match for the tone of the MIG oil brusher. Painting the cloth beforehand is definitely the right approach, and it's best done with an airbrush, even though it tends to blow away easily. Using a brush creates little push marks in the fabric that just don't look right. I originally wanted to apply a Tom's decal from the racing team that run this Supra, but it simply wouldn't stick. And then we arrive at the most nerve-wracking moment of this entire build. A true make or break situation. Pure terror!
I'm scared. Oh, I hope it's gonna work.
Because I had practiced so much, I knew exactly what to do. The trick was to spray the tissue first with paint and let it dry completely. Then I soaked it carefully under the tap and allowed it to drip dry. While it's wet, the tissue becomes very easy to drape and the paint, Vallejo in this case, doesn't come off at all. The wet handkerchief, that's what it really is, doesn't do any damage to the varnished Supra, so I could take my time. Once I was happy with the draping, I applied VMS paper shaper at key points, fixing certain folds that I liked and wanted to keep. This also makes it permanent. The cloth is now fully fixed onto the Supra. After that, I let everything dry for at least a full day before moving on to the next step, adding shadows and highlights. The shadows were painted with a darker grey in the recessed folds. I dry brushed the highlights on all the erased areas, and this whole process creates much more contrast in the cloth. Next came the dust layer using Tamiya Buff. I applied the paint from the jar onto my wet palette and thinned it slightly there, since Tamiya paint is quite thick. Something interesting happened. As the paint dried on the palette, it naturally became a bit grainy, which created a beautiful dusty texture. The bodywork of the car received a light dusting as well, along with some raised grime in places that made sense. Doing that is even more scary than dusting up the interior, you can imagine. But adding dirt to a barn find like this just gives it 100 extra kudos in my opinion. And how about crushed flies on the nose of the Supra? The windshield also picked up a few mysterious streaks in the dirt, left behind by someone we'll meet later in the diorama. Cutting XPS is best done outdoors for rather smoky reasons. The base would end up being very small because I want the diorama to feel like a cramped, cluttered garage. What a blessing it is that you can find such great 3D designs online these days.
Oh my god.
Some are free, the best ones are usually paid. From these Fujimi kits I only used the shelving unit and the vacuum cleaner. With a few modifications, the shelf turned out exactly the way I wanted it. A few months ago, a brand I wasn't familiar with reached out to me to collaborate. Gaahleri. They sent me this airbrush and it turned out to be exactly what I was looking for. My Hardran Steenbeck, which I used to paint the car, is a perfectly good airbrush, but during long spraying sessions it starts to hurt my hands. This Swallowtail SD, as it is called, is a real relief. It not only sprays beautifully, it also feels very comfortable in the hand. You can imagine that I've been using it constantly ever since it arrived to my total satisfaction. And you can too, because I'm allowed to offer you a 10% discount on the purchase price. Use the code HobbyRobbie at the URL shown, and before you know it, you'll have the same pleasant airbrushing experience as I do. I get a small commission out of each sale, so you support this channel directly. For the drill, I mixed a custom color inspired by a major Japanese tool manufacturer. The drill itself was resin printed and I bought the design on cult3d.com as part of a larger toolset. Scratch building small parts like the power plug gives me more and more joy. 5 years ago I didn't build anything myself, and now I dare to do much more. For this diorama I designed a whole set of decals, which also required white decals. For that I use white toner from Ghost, a German company that provided me with this cartridge. It's very simple. You replace the black toner with the white one and design anything you want printed in white as black in your artwork. You're basically tricking your printer and the results are excellent. Printed on their own decal paper, which is superb and very well suited for scale modeling. I've used their toners for years and I'm very happy with them, so I can honestly recommend them. Being able to create your own decals is incredibly satisfying. Check out the links in the video description. On Cult3D I also found a 1970s television, which I recreated as accurately as possible using reference photos from the internet. It's actually a European model, even though this diorama takes place in Japan. But fortunately, only you and I know that. The Trinitron colors of course had to be there, along with a silver trim around the picture tube. For the screen itself, I designed a decal that also suggests the subtle convex curve of the glass. I always placed a decal underneath first, otherwise the result would be far too dark. The microscopic Sony logo couldn't be left out, and I sealed everything with a clear coat to protect the decals, because another weathering session was still to come. The vacuum cleaner comes from the Fujimi kit, but I didn't like the supplied hose. So, just like in the interior of the Supra, I made my own using milliput. Since that material becomes rock hard when cured, I shaped the hose directly into its final form and test fitted it into the shelving unit right away. The power cable and plug head were included in the kit, while the decal was designed by me. The experience I gained scratch building tiny plugs also came in handy when upgrading a headset. I wanted to recreate a race engineer's headset, so everything needed to look believable. The buttons on the ear cups should probably have been placed a bit higher, but I still think it looks pretty cool. The Tom's logo, from the team that ran the Supra, adds an extra layer of credibility. Washes are always a good idea, because they add depth to your object, and they're so easy to use, as you already saw with the panel lines on the Supra. For this project I designed an incredible amount of things myself. Take this Japanese box for oranges for example, printed on brown craft paper from the art store, cut out and glued together. And voila! You've got a nice little box! I recreated the box from Toyota Racing Department using online reference photos. The PlayStation box simply had to be there, so I reconstructed that one from a YouTube video where someone shows the original packaging. I also recreated a Castrol box. Castrol being the main sponsor of the race team, using a few reference photos from the internet. These little projects within a project take a lot of time, but they're also extremely satisfying. I later painted the white edges of the paper beige to make them blend in better. For the PlayStation itself, I also designed decals and cut them out very tightly to keep the amount of carrier film to an absolute minimum, because that stuff can start to shine. I designed the decals for the controllers as well. And now you probably understand why it takes so long before a new Hobby Robby video appears. This diorama is a collection of tributes to the barn-find Supra, to the game Gran Turismo and the first PlayStation, and also to the Tamiya kit that has been a huge success over 30 years. For that reason, I created a dedicated decal set, scaling down decals from the 1-in-24 kit and designing new ones for the headlights, taillights and glass parts. Applying those tiny decals is, of course, challenging, but it was also a lot of fun. I initially planned to paint the wheels myself, but I eventually decided against it. I made decals for them instead, it just looks much more precise. The kit box itself couldn't be left out either, so I recreated that as well. I found an announcement poster for Gran Turismo online and decided to frame it. The title of that poster also became the title of this entire piece. Next up was finishing the base. I chose a blotchy garage floor, keeping the center area darker. It sits underneath the car and enhances the shadow. To bring all the objects in the diorama in line with the Supra's weathering, I applied the same oil paint treatment here to give everything that dusty appearance. Now it was time to create the final element of the diorama, the cherry on top. My beloved cat Akka. I found this fantastic sculpt by Alexander on Cult 3D. He creates some of the most beautiful animal sculpts you can find. They can really bring a diorama to life, so I highly recommend his work. He was so kind to give you all a 15% discount. Please check out the link in the video description. Painting the miniature Akka was an absolute joy, and I often had to stop and take a good look at the real Akka again to get it right. It's worth taking your time here and building up the fur layer by layer using heavily thin paint. Then it was time to glue everything in place and arrange the diorama. Composition always plays a role. Things aren't placed as randomly as they might seem. At the very last moment I added the tiny type plate to the TV, taken from a video about a real one. All for the details, right? The shelving unit could be fixed in place thanks to small pieces of wire I had glued to it earlier. I wanted the PlayStation box to sit on the hood, as if the owner had recently taken it out to reminisce. I glued the box with PVA and the 3D printed parts with flexible CA glue. Sometimes things almost fall into place by themselves.
Alright, that's its place.
Once everything was positioned, I added more dust using MIG oil brusher. So I named the diorama after the promotional poster for the Gran Turismo game. The Race is On is also a reference to the restoration of the real Supra and to it being brought back to life. PVA glue works surprisingly well for fixing the model to the base. It's incredibly versatile. The very last parts were glued to the base, and also here PVA and flexible CA glue were my best friends. Adding the final details around the car feels a bit like a victory lap. It's a pleasure to put the finishing touches on such a tightly packed diorama.
Okay, here he goes.
And of course, the real cherry on top is Mini Akka sitting on the car.
This is it. Dio. Done.
And I think Akka himself would approve. The whole project cost me more than 200 building hours. I just hope you like what you see. Please let me know. And turn on the bell icon under the video to be the first to know when I've uploaded a new project. I'm already busy building one. And remember, don't be sobby. Build a car model kit and watch Hobby Robbie.